25th.
Good morning and welcome to the Vermont Legislature's House Committee on Environment and Energy. This morning we are going to continue discussion of H67, an act relating to household products containing hazardous substances. And we are going to welcome Matt Chapman and Josh Kelly back. Committee, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. For the record, I'm Josh Kelly, Solid Waste Program Manager with Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. Thank you for having us in for testimony. We'll be talking about household hazardous waste. And actually last time I left with the committee assistant this little free recycling, or what we call special recycling, handout for you guys. It covers the existing extended producer responsibility laws in Vermont. Essentially our electronics, paint, batteries, light bulbs, things you've heard about already. Like that is with your committee assistant.
I'm going to pass it around.
Yeah, just they're collected all around the state. So just as a reference point in terms of similar programs of what we're talking about today. Also given to the committee assistant and sent over electronically earlier is a handout, just very, very high level, that I can walk you through today about household hazardous waste. You have received a decent amount of testimony already, so I'll try not to be too duplicative. In short, in terms of my world, solid waste, household hazardous waste, or HHW, is the most toxic form of the solid waste stream. It would be hazardous waste were it not from the generator from which it comes from, mainly residential people. And if it's released into
Say that one more time again. That was the
sure.
It would be
So
hazardous.
solid waste, the most toxic portion of the waste stream is household hazardous waste in terms of solid waste. And if it were from anyone else other than residents generally and some small businesses, it would be considered hazardous waste. So as it gets bigger in scale, if you produce more of it, then you're a regulated hazardous waste generator. If not, it's considered household hazardous waste. But its toxicity is it's no different. It's just about size and scale typically.
Who generates it?
And who generates it. Yeah, that's how the federal regulations determine what's defined as hazardous waste, and state regulations that follow.
Correct.
If released in the environment, it has the same impact to harming water quality, plant, animal, and human health. And in the handout that you have, essentially HHW includes common products that are labeled caution, toxic, danger, hazard, warning, poisonous, reactive, corrosive, and flammable. And so what are those? Just on the sheet, you've got like hazardous cleaners, like oven cleaners, mineral spirits, paint thinners, furniture strippers, aerosols, so spray paints and things like that, pool and hot tub chemicals, rust remover. Those are just some examples of the types of products we're talking about. And let me just step back and say, extended producer responsibility is a tool that is kind of the most progressive tool that is being used in solid waste to date right now, where you're looking all the way upstream at products before they become waste.
No, just thinking.
Question.
No,
Got it. So I just saw a question for
I
me.
think I saw that.
you didn't.
So it's being used by more and more states. The next part of the sheet talks about HHW responsibility laws. Last year we had H115, now we have H67. I want to bring it into focus that we've had a study done by the Product Stewardship Institute in 2019 that looked at what type of producers would be covered that make these products would have to pay the cost for the collection of these materials. And the estimate is that the 20 producers on this sheet, the first page, produce about 60% of the HHW collected in Vermont. So that's like the main universe. And the typical way that extended producer responsibility programs operate is that the ones that sell the most pay the most share of the cost. That's how the system tends to work. Moving on, yeah,
The question is, they sell the most by volume, by
sales, but
Well, I mean, I think so. Just stepping back for what extended producer responsibility programs are, it basically requires that the people who manufacture the product that is of concern be responsible for end of life care. And to some degree, we don't get into the business as the state telling them how they allocate costs. They can be as simple or complex in their planning and financial mechanisms, sort of in the product stewardship organization on how they want to divide costs amongst themselves. So the benefit is it takes sort of the state out of the role of having to go through the machinations of, are we regulating by toxicity? Are we regulating by volume? Are we regulating by some other factor? And we defer to industry to let them come up with the most equitable and efficient way to allocate costs.
Yeah. And that has been working in our other EPR programs. It works with batteries, works with paint. I think Legislative Council was commenting on the agency's relationship with these stewardship organizations. In general, I mean, we try and have the most congenial relationship possible so that the public sees convenient services. And we've managed that with mercury light bulbs, with batteries, with paint, with electronics. So briefly moving on onto the second page, we've heard about some of the costs, so I won't spend a lot of time. You're going to hear more from Solid Waste District.
Quick question for you, just in reference to those other programs that exist. The number of manufacturers this time around will be quite a bit more, right?
Yes.
Like by what magnitude?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's in the study. 600 was in the study. Yeah, so 600, but I think the focus would be probably on those 20 on page
Oh,
one.
I see.
There are issues with so-called free riders in other programs. Often what we have is the stewardship organization comes to the agency, complains. This happened in the battery law when it first rolled out. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but there was some questions about hardware stores, so we can get into that. The question is, like, when is a retailer even aware of this program? If they sell their own brand, like they sell bleach that's Walgreens labeled bleach, then they are potentially a manufacturer of this program. This happened with some batteries that were labeled with a name brand, hardware store X brand batteries. They were not in the program, paying into the program. The stewardship organization sent us a complaint. We followed up on a stop sale notice to these stores, and they came into the program or stopped selling those name brand batteries. And it was an effective resolution of that issue. It's not a very common thing that happens. So moving on to costs, you'll hear more from solid waste districts. Let me just put it in context. The state has been working on and requiring municipalities to collect these materials for 30 years, since about 1992. We have been doing this, and it's required by law in our state solid waste plan, which is effectively a rule. It goes through the rulemaking process every 5 years. We're about due in 2025 for a new one. And we have always prioritized that because I came here previously last week and said, solid waste managers look at toxicity and tonnage, and HHW is the most toxic form of solid waste stream. So that's why we've had to focus on it for so long. We have some towns commenting that they are paying upwards of $100 to $400 per carload for the fees associated with a one-time event. And the HHW collection events are increasing in cost. So a question?
Yeah, Representative Morris.
$400 a carload. I mean, cars coming in or when they're collecting and then the car.
If you were to go in to bring some toxic stuff you had in your house, you're getting rid of, if they billed you for the actual cost, in some cases it would be $400. Yeah.
100, is that the floor? So I drive into my solid waste district and I have my thing I'm bringing in.
That would be a great question for them. I can say that some have permanent facilities which lower the cost, generally the cost per person that comes in, but you have more people going in, but they can comment on that more. We have seen the one-day events in particular rising in cost, sometimes as much as 50% over the last.
Representative Smith.
Thank you. We have had, I think we have 2 hazardous waste days in Derby. Nobody pays anything. They bring it in and it's unloaded.
Right.
There's no cost to anybody in the town or in the waste district. Is that the case everywhere? Or do some people have to pay when they?
Some people have to pay. Usually it's a nominal fee, $20 a carload, but the actual cost of the municipality can be upwards of $100 to $400 per carload.
Okay.
And that does depend on how many people have come in that day. There's numerous factors that are going into this. Some of them have to do directly with the pandemic, decreases in staffing, supply chain issues, and people not wanting to work the weekends. I have some other testimony that goes along with this. We have 7 permanent solid waste HHW facilities currently in the state that are operated by municipal solid waste districts or alliances. And last year, about 90 HHW collection events were offered around the state because the state's minimum is 2 per year. Either have 2 fall, spring HHW collection events per year or a permanent facility. And some regions have to have more collection events because their geography is so great. We ask them to have one within 20 miles of each town. So the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District has about 50 towns.
Yeah.
So they provide more collection events, although they do have a permanent facility, so they could scale some of that back.
Okay.
But to clarify, when Representative Smith says no one has to pay, who is paying?
The municipality is paying, and sometimes they collect a nominal fee to recoup some of their costs from the resident or the small business that attends that event.
The
So
municipalities.
I would say that the town of Derby, maybe we are. I don't know.
Someone's
I know
paying.
people going to
Yeah.
the
Derby is
through don't have to pay.
Derby is part of the NEK Waste Management District. That district is absorbing those costs for the town.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
It's about $1.6 million we estimate that municipalities are paying out and for these costs per year. That's both permanent facility costs for their staffing, for their drums, for their safety equipment, and one-day events. The one-day events are particularly increasing in cost.
So Representative Stebbins and then Morris and then Sibilia.
So just, sorry, you said 1.6, thanks, Madam Chair, 1.6 million that munis are paying per year just for this or for all of those events?
All of those events and the permanent facility operations as well.
So when we say municipalities are paying for these specific,
Services.
well, specifically these household hazardous wastes, it's really the taxpayers. But of that 1.6, how much do you think would be reduced to taxpayers by implementing 67?
Great question. We have paint care already, which Ledge Council O'Grady explained to you. And the majority of what is collected in HHW events tends to be paint. And then about 25% of the materials left are considered household hazardous waste that would be covered by this bill. So they already have a little bit of relief from paint. And you'll hear more from them about their costs and specific needs. But about 25% of what's collected is HHW, but it tends to be the most toxic and the most expensive. Certain pesticides, when people found out Roundup causes cancer, they were flooded with Roundup. With PFAS in the news, ski wax, this came up yesterday, what PFAS product? Ski wax is showing up at these events. It is toxic. People don't know what to do with it. They're like, take this away from me, please. And so now the districts have this and have to deal with it and have to deal with disposal costs. So while it's a small percentage by weight, remember we measure everything in waste by weight, but by cost, it's a pretty high cost center.
So if it's 1.6 for all of it, one could roughly say 25% of that, but bump it up because it's by cost for the toxicity? Or is that just not?
That was a survey of the total cost. That's just cost. I can get into revenue on the other side. There is some relief that they receive from the state to fund these costs. We put out each year what's called SWIP grants, Solid Waste Implementation Plan, SWIP grants to the solid waste management entities to the tune of $614,000 a year. It used to be about 400 about 3 or 4 years ago. We've upped it by 200,000 per year in response to these challenges of increased costs. And we've maintained that each year, 614 is part of the pass-through of the Solid Waste Management Assistance Fund, which is the $6 per ton tax on trash that all people pay in Vermont. And it's earmarked for those purposes. Those don't cover their costs. It's usually a fraction of the cost of what a municipality pays. In addition, they do receive some funding from the Agency of Agriculture for pesticide collection, but regularly those have not covered their pesticide collection costs either. Generally speaking, these funds don't cover the cost of HHW events. And you'll hear more from them, I think, with the specifics on that.
Representative Morris.
Just to follow up on Representative Stebbins' question, because it was close to mine. The program right now, as we know, when you say there's a cost to the towns, the taxpayers are paying for that because they're the ones that are funding the
Yes, you did hear.
solid waste districts. So the consumer is already paying for that in their taxes.
Correct.
If the EPR transfers those costs into the purchase of the product, it's going to become like a user fee for the people that are purchasing that, if they incorporate any increased cost into the cost of the product at sale.
So the way this program's designed, there is not sort of a fee put on the product. Now, the manufacturer may incorporate those costs into the products prior to sale into the state. Our experience with other similar EPR programs, just take e-waste, for example, we haven't seen those costs in Vermont get shifted back onto consumers. So I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're in regional non-franchise distribution chains, and those costs basically get spread across, the region or nation when it happens.
Sure, but there's usually some money in the salvage or something. That's what I've heard in the past with some of the component parts, or and maybe we don't need to go there.
Probably not.
But my point was that the consumer is paying now either through taxes, or if the EPRs do increase the cost for products, it's going to be a user fee, if you will, as opposed, because the person buying it's going to have.
Typically, it goes into the profits of whoever's selling bleach or selling pesticides. And it's up to them if they increase those on the product. But as Matt was saying, if you go to buy a laptop and your son-in-law buys one from Arizona, the cost of that laptop is about the same in Vermont than it is here. And those are covered right now under the e-cycles program. Sure. The state of Vermont bills Dell for the cost of those programs. Same with batteries. You buy a 4-pack of batteries here versus in Maine, and they're both about the same, but they are covered in Vermont under this collection program.
And just the summarize, and I'll be done. Without a program such as this, then our single landfill becomes the owner of these materials as they get deposited.
Yeah, we can talk about that. There was a study group done in 2017. As this issue was arising, the state met with this. HHW has been a focus for us for decades, as you can tell. It was starting to come to a head. We formed a study group. We submitted a legislative report in 2017. We had haulers, we had Casella, who operates the landfill. We had even Representative David Dean on that committee, environmental advocates, lobbyists, and solid waste management entities, as well as hazardous waste contractors at the state. They essentially looked at the system and the cost of the system. And in some of the comments that were received, Casella did discuss that if there's not programs like this, they do see more of these materials in the waste stream. They have seen that gone down. With these programs in place, they've seen less of these materials in the waste stream. They're concerned about household hazardous waste because it increases the toxicity of leachate. It increases the hazards to their workers. It's very expensive to clean up, tens of thousands of dollars if they have a spill, which they have had, where people hide stuff in their trash and then it breaks on the tipping floor at the transfer station. So yeah, they said there has been some success with these programs at getting that stuff out of the waste stream over time.
Thank you.
Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, just a additional detail. So I know the consumer is paying one way or the other, but I thought there was a requirement for free collection days. And I also think I heard you say that when you were talking about the $400 per car, that sometimes people are coming in and they are being charged something. Can you just help me understand that?
Yeah, there's not right now. It's required that municipalities, solid waste management entities, offer HHW collection. They can decide how they charge for that. The state doesn't regulate if they charge. They just have to offer the collection. Some have a nominal fee, $20 per carload. Some have no fee. Some with the small businesses that come in do it by appointment and have a small fee associated with that. The way solid waste districts and are funded tends to be a surcharge on trash. They put $20 per ton on every ton of garbage from their town. And when the hauler runs up to the landfill says, what town is this from? And they say from Rutland, or they say from Windham County, or they say what towns it's from. And then they apply the surcharge on that, and those taxes get paid back to the district to fund their costs. So it is paid by residents in a different way, as you were saying, but we don't require a fee per carload. It's up to each district how they do that. I was just remarking on how much it actually costs per carload. That's what I was.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing to be clear about, this bill proposes to basically have the events free.
Yeah,
It's-
it would be joining this free special recycling handout.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sadkowitz and then Stone.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, just for perspective, I just looked up in our town budget, what we're budgeting for household hazardous waste. And in my pretty small town, we are budgeting over $12,000. And I think, and I suspect that number is actually lower than it needs to be, based on what we're hearing. But that's what we've budgeted the last couple of years.
I know I want to be mindful of time. I can say some other small points is that last year we had about 20,000 households participating in these programs with an average participation rate of about 8%. A 12-14% participation rate, and others probably have better data, is considered a good participation rate. And as Mike O'Grady talked about, there are aspects of the bill that sort of ask the stewardship organization to seek out better participation, which we want. And we know from Solid Waste 101 that when people get charged to dispose of something, they walk back away and try and hide it in the trash. And that's what we don't want. And that's kind of where we're heading with these costs. That sort of the municipality either absorbs them or passes more on. So I think I've covered most everything. We talked a little bit about the hardware store and the stop sale example, and then I did address PFAS. The very last page of this sheet shows a small bar chart of the battery program, the battery EPR program, which is our most recent producer responsibility program. And it began taking effect right around the turn of 2015 into 2016. So you can see the increase in batteries collected as a result of that program. And we have seen that with our other programs as well. We tend to be per capita first in the nation in most of collection categories for electronics, batteries, for paint.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on the products themselves. What about those products that I see there's like, the liquid plumber, some other products that are in here that like, and even pool chemicals. Say you're done with that container, you've used it, you rinse it out, and you can put the container back into the waste, to the recycling. I mean, how does that affect the overall like charge?
Yeah, there would be no charge. There would be nothing covered. There would be no product that needs special management at that point. So if they use it all up, that producer is not paying for that product to be managed.
Okay, thank you.
So that came up last year.
Mhm.
If it's almost all used up, should it go to a household hazardous waste collection facility, or should it go into your recycle?
Okay.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't put a 1/3 gallon of bleach in your recycling bin. That would be really bad and dangerous
but-
for the workers on the line.
Right.
For the sake of argument, a teaspoon was asked about.
The general standard, and I think others who operate MRFs can comment, is empty of contents. A very, very small amount of residue is usually not an issue, but it's supposed to be empty of contents.
And so would you recommend that the consumer, like if it's a bleach bottle, you let it dry?
Yeah, or you just leave the cap off a little bit. I mean, I think if it's empty and you put the cap back on, I think it's recyclable. We'll let you.
Okay. Sibilia and then Smith. Okay, Smith, Representative Smith.
Thank you. In these battery programs, the last year or so, have you seen a lot of EV batteries?
Those are not covered by that program. These are small, single use,
Okay.
lower voltage batteries. EV batteries are an issue. Be happy to come back and talk about batteries with the committee. It's, as I mentioned in the biennial report, which we covered very, very briefly, batteries are allowing us to achieve a low carbon future. My lawnmower, for example, no longer gas, but they come with some dangers and hazards. And when they get in the waste stream, we have had solid waste workers
I
impacted.
would like to hear more about it at some point.
We
Okay.
pin in that one.
So, and I have a question about products with PFAS in them. So you brought up ski wax, which is a fairly common one in Vermont. Other products that you're seeing that have PFAS that are coming to these events, and how are they? I mean, I guess all of these things are divided by chemical category type, I assume, and then what's happening to them.
Most are managed out of state at hazardous waste landfills or incinerators. There's a chance some could be repurposed or recycled. In the case of paint, which I said does come in through these HHW events, the majority of the quality latex paint is recycled. The oil-based paint is used as fuel, generally speaking. There are some of the paint is too far gone to do anything with, and it's disposed. It's often dried out and caked, and so that actually happens in a lot of cases. The other PFAS products that I'm aware of are outdoor product gear coating, DWR repellents on jackets or boots, waterproofing type products. Those are the ones that are immediately aware to me as a homeowner. There may be actually some carpet cleaner that I have at my house right now that needs to go to an HHW event. It's been sitting in my cabinet that I've been waiting to get to one. It says stain repellent, on it, and it's old, and I'm sure it contains those chemicals. I'm fairly positive.
And as far as the PFAS destruction, right now EPA's advice is that those materials be stored until an effective destruction technology has been.
They're going with our nuclear waste somehow until we know what to do with it.
Right now, EPA has no guidance on effective. They once upon a time, probably 5 years ago, advised that incineration. They have revisited that thought and have basically advised storage until they come up with a different disposal technique.
Representative Sibilia.
Storage where?
At a permitted facility, at a permitted hazardous waste facility.
Who has the obligation in Vermont for storage? So the stain remover goes to solid waste district. They're collecting PFAS.
They will,
Say.
the solid waste district will contract with a permitted hazardous waste company like US Ecology. It's a big national company. They pick it up, or they actually often hold the event, take it in their trucks to their facility in Williston. That facility consolidates material there and ships it to other facilities throughout the United States. And there's basically a network of permitted facilities throughout the United States for both treatment, destruction, and storage, and landfilling of hazardous wastes.
So do we store PFAS
In the state,
Vermont?
no.
Do you know where they are stored?
I don't know where the storage facility is.
You don't know what states are storing those?
Well, I'm assuming there are permitted storage facilities under what's called the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the federal hazardous waste. And I'm assuming that is where they are going. They're being drummed into 55-gallon drums and then stored at those facilities.
Yeah, I would love more information
I'm
on that.
happy to-
Fine if you have it.
Happy to pull.
Speaking of more information, Director Chapman also offered to come back to follow up on PFAS, which we will do with plans. And when we have a chance for more education, we'll fit that in. Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I think this is the fourth time at this bill, maybe it's just the third. I think it's great that the administration is supporting this. Any reason for the shift? Like, if you can help me understand, the change of heart.
Well, I mean, I think one of the largest changes is that the focusing of what's defined as being covered material under this bill. Historically, what was covered was much broader in scope and included things that weren't hazardous wastes. So that was problematic. There are a few comments on this bill. I mean, we support it. In reviewing it, there are things that I think are procedural, but are worth noting. as far as recommendations for the committee to make changes on. But we are supportive of H67. Yes.
And more specifically, previous drafts had the stewardship organization establishing a collection location and building it in each county in the state, I believe. And we already have been making progress there. We've basically been coming at this issue from two different directions. With the funds that the Solid Waste Management Program manages, we've been trying to fund permanent HHW collections because the data is there. People use it when they have more availability to use it. So people with permanent facilities use more of the service. And this bill basically says serve the municipality services that are out there. So effectively, it was a little bit of a high cost bar previous bills, and now this is more meeting the moment.
Thank you.
Further questions or things you would like to? I mean, I'm curious about your suggested edits and changes.
They're pretty straightforward. One is that we recommend there's an advisory committee in here, and I would ask that we not create a specialized advisory committee for this particular EPR program.
And our advisory.
Yeah, we don't have it in other EPR programs, and the history is that is a resource burden with not significant. And I would add, if there are members of that advisory committee that you want the agency to consult with as a part of the public process, I'm more than happy to have a specific list of people we consult with. But having a sort of independent body that we have to staff and administer is resource burdensome for us. The other is, and I'm happy to get the language to you, that in the process of plan approval, this creates a whole new process outside of sort of our standard processes for how we do administrative review and approval of the plan. I would ask that we just use the sort of standard review processes that are in Chapter 170 of Title 10, rather than creating a new process that's distinct only for HHW plans. So I can get that language to you, Madam Chair, and Mr. O'Grady.
It'd be great if you would send that in.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for that. One more question, Representative.
I seem to recall that there was language about having those stewardship organization do more creative things, because there's that ratcheting up. So would we see maybe an expansion? Like right now, there'd be the collections, maybe more collections, but maybe they could even get more services once they start to.
It seems possible in the bill because there's, as Mike O'Grady was walking through, there is they submit to the agency their plan and their plan for increasing over time. And if they don't meet those, then there's an opportunity for the agency to ask for more, whether it's outreach and education to make sure people know about it, or services. We do have this with the battery program, and we have been working with them collaboratively to increase information to consumers and try and get their numbers up. Their numbers did come up. They dipped to 2020. Almost everything dipped in terms of waste tonnage around 2020. So yes, I think that's in there.
And last question would be, is there any precedent or interest in having any kind of evaluation on the part of the public?
So this bill includes an audit function. So it requires annual, I think regular programmatic and fiscal audits be provided to the agency as a part of the operation of the stewardship plan.
Which is typical of our other EPR programs. And
Yes.
they do them usually, it's usually every 5 years, or sometimes as much as, I think there's might be one that's annual. But we find that every 5 years is pretty effective, and it's not just financial, it's how effective is the program for serving the public need. And they do a third-party auditor that we have ability to approve with them, and that helps make sure that somebody from outside is looking to see how effective they are.
I was thinking more of like the citizens being surveyed periodically about what type of services would you be more likely to use, or would you like to see added? You know, like, is there going to be any?
Sometimes the auditor goes so far as to talk, often they talk directly with the collectors to see how effective it is for them and what they're like. In batteries, hardware stores can participate in that program. So they've talked to the hardware stores, say what's working well for you. And then we get that feedback and then we can apply to the stewardship organization what steps they need to take.
And I think the other thing is that on top of all of this, there's a waste planning process. And that planning process is sort of where we reach out to the public and get their engagement beyond just HHW, but across all waste streams and programs that we administer.
And we'll hear from the solid waste management districts soon. So Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, I apologize if you've given this information before. The number of EPR programs that there are in the state,
Technically 5.
and they are,
sort of a form of product stewardship or EPR, because manufacturers of covered beverages must ensure they have a pickup agent, return your nickels. So we don't usually include bottle bill on that in that guide, but 5. Paint, batteries, electronic devices, which is computers and televisions and printers, mercury bulbs, mercury thermostats.
okay, and is the orphan mechanism, you understand what I'm saying? Is that consistent in each one of those?
Is not, they are a little different each one. However, it's a little bit easier with electronics. The brand is there on the electronic. It's not like a jug of bleach that's now in a milk jug and you can't tell where the bleach came from. Like that is an orphaned HHW product. So in our other programs, it's less of an issue. But as I said, we have had free riders, batteries that are of a manufacturer not participating, and gotten a complaint from the stewardship entity who's paying, all their manufacturers are paying in and want to see compliance with.
Right, but I think it's important too. There's orphans and there are free riders, and we have tools to deal with the people who choose not to participate in the program. We can require that they basically cease selling their products in the state of Vermont. Whereas the challenge that we see with orphans are the people who basically stop making products in this product area, and there's no longer any sort of hook for the agency to bring them in. That sort of falls into the orphan category. And, you know, we've dealt with that in other programs in different ways, right? So sometimes, you know, when they're gone, that it just becomes a part of the total cost, and the people who are still there absorb that orphan share. Last year, in the context of mercury bulbs, we basically expanded the scope of who has to participate to anyone who had at one time produced a mercury bulb. So you don't, even if you're not producing them today, if you produced them 5 years ago and got out of the market, you still have to be responsible for those products when they come into the disposal area.
How does enforcement work for that? Because if they're not making it now, I mean, isn't enforcement then you're banned from selling, and if you don't have the product?
So I think there are two things. One is there's traditional civil enforcement, right? So and that would probably be the first approach that we go down. But it also, and I need to go look, I think we said we changed it from a stop sale of mercury bulbs to bulbs. So that most of these companies are still
Selling bulbs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of effective mechanisms, the stop sale is fairly effective.
Okay.
We've seen in other situations.
So going back to the orphan, I understand that this is a particular, are any of the other EPR programs close conceptually, their orphan programs to this household hazardous waste?
I'd probably say batteries is the most similar to this bill overall, but I don't think that has a specific addressing clause for orphans. Orphans are not as common simply in the other.
well.
Is this a new construct in this? Okay.
So I think the important thing to remember is an orphan share starts becoming problematic when its portion of the pie starts to be more than the people who are actually participating, right? Like for example, in the e-waste sector, right? There are old electronic waste companies, Texas Instruments, that have gone out of business and may still have products coming into the e-waste collection system, but there aren't that many products, and the rest of the e-waste system is large enough to absorb those costs, right? And I think that is what you're looking at, the challenge that an orphan share has with respect to the administration of a program like this. It's how much product are you talking about? How big is the total pie that is being dealt with here?
And do we have an estimation here of what's going to happen?
Can you be more specific?
Orphan share?
The orphan
household
care, I would have
hazardous
to ask some of the solid waste districts what percentage they think of their HHW is orphan products. But I can't, again, I'm giving you the milk jug example
Yeah.
of bleach in there that I just dumped in but I don't think that happens that often. It's usually a clean out of somebody's house and, grandpa's Raid is taken off the shelf and this weird powder for killing moles is taken off the shelf and brought in. And they're still in their containers. They just got bought and not used.
Thank you.
Representative Tory.
Quick question on that. So in that scenario, granddad's house,
Yeah.
what if they happen to have a big old dumpster from Casella in the driveway? Do they throw it in there? And
It shouldn't.
Okay.
I'm not saying it never happens, but
Okay.
as we saw with testimony and discussion with Casella previously during the stakeholder group, they've seen that go down, the hiding of waste. I mean, small amounts are hard to see in the waste stream, but they have had spills come in the transfer station where something's been bagged and then it gets crushed and then they have a real issue on their hands. Tens of thousands of dollars to clean that up. So it can be dangerous and impacting.
Okay, one final question, Representative Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this list of items, I just want to understand this correctly. Is this just a list of what is household hazardous waste, or are all of these items, if manufactured by these 20 producers, covered under H67?
Those are mostly what's covered under H67.
Okay.
Because there are some other things that come in, but they're covered by those other producer responsibility programs.
Right.
Mercury bulbs often come in. As we discussed, paint is covered. What we actually found was when Paint Care rolled out, there was press around it and everybody brought their paint to their HHW event, even though now Sherwin-Williams had collection of paint and it was free, but they didn't know about that. They knew about their town's Derby collection event. And so suddenly Derby's tonnage went way up and they were a little inundated and surprised by that. So while it was covered, those costs were covered, it did increase volumes.
And ski wax isn't on the list.
No, I don't think it's a very common, PFAS is still emerging in terms of toxicity and commonality as an HHW event product, but it has come in to events. So.
And sorry, Madam Chair, it would be covered or not? Ski wax.
No,
Would be an orphan?
I don't think so.
I think it might be an orphan one unless it becomes part of,
It's Vermont hazardous waste.
yeah, might as well.
yeah.
So
It's not Vermont hazardous waste.
it actually is defined as well, you know what?
It's emerging.
Sorry, it's emerging.
Yeah.
There are some issues there are some perfluorinated compounds that are covered as hazardous waste under a Vermont listing. Yes. But not a solid, right? Liquids are covered, solids are not.
So the example of a car wax would not be covered.
Correct. Car wax would not be covered, but your liquid fabric coating in a bottle may.
And so, but they would be accepted as household hazardous waste, these solids.
Oh,
Car wax is petroleum.
yes.
That's what I heard.
Well,
It may be covered through another mechanism, I think is what Jen's saying. You can have some hazardous constituents of other types in there besides PFAS.
Okay. All right.
I
So many questions. Representative Morris.
This may be a question for you.
Okay.
So A&R has referenced that they would oppose an advisory committee in the way it was outlined here. And then the collection plan, we had that conversation yesterday where a collection plan could be submitted. It could be reviewed, it could go back, we could be into a circulatory repetition of plans. When is a good time for that conversation from A&R comment?
I think it's great to ask Mr. Chapman right now. Because he's the one who would be dealing with that issue.
well, so the way and this is one of the changes that I recommended is that we're okay with the plan and we support having a plan. It's really more what I'm looking at is the process by which a plan is reviewed. Now, with respect to this sort of cyclical process of, a plan comes in, it doesn't meet the standards. We provide comments, they respond, and it's with a still inadequate plan. The law is set up to authorize the agency to basically make changes. My recommendation would be that we, prior to a public comment period, make changes based on, just like we would in sort of any other permitting program, we would make changes based on what our regulations require and put that draft plan out for public comment. And if the manufacturers continued to have issues with it, they obviously could put comments into the record as a part of the public comment process, and they continue to have their rights to appeal that plan if it is that problematic. So, but we normally we're hesitant in doing that sort of thing, but I think there comes an end to these sort of cyclical processes after we have provided them comments about what they need to do to meet the regulations, and they've declined to do so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was planning to go to the Lamoille Regional Solid Waste District and then get to you. So we're going to welcome Susan Alexander, who's joining us via Zoom.
Good morning.
Morning.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, good. Thank you, Chair Sheldon and members of the House Environment and Energy Committee. My name for the record is Susan Alexander, and I'm the manager of the Lamoille Solid Waste District. We are a union municipality consisting of the 10 towns in Lamoille County, as well as the towns of Craftsbury and Worcester. We're a chartered municipality with our mission to reduce.
Excuse me. We may have to have you turn your video off because we are losing your audio, unfortunately.
How's that? Is that working any better for you?
Let's give it a try.
Okay, thanks for letting me know that. We are a chartered municipality, and I'm quoting here from our mission, which is our purpose is to reduce the quantity and toxicity of trash going into the landfill. So that's why I'm personally excited to be here today, and I appreciate you asking us to come in and discuss our support for H67. I did send a letter in yesterday, and I'd like to share that. I don't know if I'm sharing on my end or your end, but if everyone has it in front of them and it's going to create problems with audio, maybe we need to skip the sharing.
Well, you're welcome to share it. Give that a try. I don't think it would interrupt the. I don't know.
Okay.
Try it. Be able to read it anyway. So we should have it. Did you post it, Kate? Yep. Thank you.
Are you able to see that okay now?
Yeah, it's there. But we have it in our on our webpage, everyone.
Okay. What I'd like to just point out in this part of the discussion is what you've been hearing about is the significant increase in rates for holding these events. We are a fairly rural area. We do not have a permanent household hazardous waste facility. And through our SWIP requirements, Solid Waste Implementation Plan is our acronym SWIP. Through those requirements, we're required to hold a minimum of 2 events a year, specifically to get these materials out of the landfill. And back in 2018, 2019, you can see those were our salad days when the setup fee for these events were under $3,000. And the setup fee, just to be clear, only covers the mobilization of the contractor and getting them on site. So that's their labor, the transportation, disposal containers, some supplies. And the setup fee is really what we've seen significant increases in over the past 5 years. It used to be in the salad days, Joyce Majors, our HHW coordinator, who's done over 100 of these, would contact a contractor and select dates and seal the deal with a promise of a homemade zucchini bread. So $2,650, they'd be on site 3-4 times a year. That has significantly changed as the industry has begun to consolidate. The contractor we used originally out of Chittenden County was purchased and consolidated with a larger company. Then it was subsumed into a holding company. And now it's been purchased by Republic, which is one of the, I think it's the second largest waste management companies in the country. And so a lot of this is not only out of our control because they're remote and we have no connections with Republic. They don't really care about our homemade zucchini bread. So you can see that with time, we're not talking about doubling or tripling. We've gone up from 2018, 2019 to 2022, 400%, over 400% increase. And that's just the setup fee. So then you go down to the next table, which shows our total cost, which is the setup fee plus what we pay the contractor to take that material and manage it appropriately, whether it's storage, incineration, reuse, repurpose, or repackage. And in 2021, we had 3 events, and it cost us almost $53,000. In 2022, we held 3 events, and it cost us almost $71,000. The number of tons collected in each of those events, if you look at if you divide that into the total cost in 2021, the cost per ton of managing this material is $2,500 last year. 2 years ago, $4,400 last year. So for comparison's sake, we collect trash and send it to the landfill in Coventry for $97 a ton. So the scale at which we're talking about, the the inadequate comparison here, it's really we're unable to continue with this management scheme the way it is. And if you look at our cost per participant, I heard numbers earlier that were even more dire than ours. But in 2021, if you were to charge that participant who just brought us a couple of cans of paint and a battery or 2 or some swimming pool chemicals, it would have cost them $68 to drive to our facility on a Saturday morning, sit in line for 20 minutes and peel off $68. That went up to $144 last year. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We charge $4 for a 30-gallon bag of trash at our drop-off locations. And a lot of HHW can fit into a $4 bag. So when we start trying to shift the cost back onto the consumer, we know that we're just going to add more and more material to our landfill that we're trying to manage for in a better way. So I just also want to point out 2 things. One is these costs do not include any in-kind labor for our staff, our equipment, our materials, our advertising, supplies. This is just what we pay the contractor. On top of that, our colleagues at Central Vermont who have been using the same contractor we use, US Ecology, which is one of the few that offers services in Vermont, received a letter last month saying that their disposal costs will be going up 11% this year. We've yet to receive that, but we anticipate having to see some increase in the disposal as well. So, as you're all aware, we have just one landfill in Vermont, and I know you'll be hearing a lot about that this session. And despite our best engineering and technology, we often know that what we put in the landfill can sometimes have far-reaching impacts, both in space and in time. Over the years, we've improved technology. We have double liners in our landfill now that collect leachate, and now we're struggling to know what to do with that leachate. So my point is we can't really engineer our way out of this problem. It's not a matter of a bigger or better or more landfills. It's really about looking at how we manage these materials and keeping the toxics and poisonous materials out of the landfill in the first place. And that's exactly what H67 is helping us to do. I want to talk just a couple of minutes about our existing EPR programs. So EPR standing for Extended Producer Responsibility. I heard Josh and Matt just covered them a little bit. I'll give you a snapshot into how they affect us in Lamoille. For example, EPR for e-waste. So that's all your computers and all the peripherals that plug into computers, monitors, printers, etc. At our 5 locations, drop-off locations last year, we diverted 47 tons of electronic material from the landfill through an EPR program. We also have EPR for batteries called Call to Recycle. And at our facilities, again, last year diverted 2.5 tons of batteries from the landfill. So you think about the scale of how much of this material is actually out there. I've heard the number 640 tons per year. I think that's low. I just did a quick little calculation. All the batteries we collect, I think it's hard to understand tonnage if you don't have some context. So 2.5 tons, that's like 4 mature dairy cows. I mean, that's a lot of material. And if they were all AA batteries, which weigh 1/8 of an ounce, that would be 640,000 batteries. That's just from our 5 drop-off locations in Lamoille. There's another program, Vermont MERC, which is the Mercury Education Reduction Coalition, I believe it's called. We were through that program, another EPR program, we were able to responsibly manage 24,000 linear feet of fluorescent tubes. So what does that look like? You could walk from the State House to Caledonia Spirits and back twice. That's how far 24,000 feet will take you. And the best part about these EPR programs is, yes, there can be a little cumbersome on the front end, and I appreciate what our agency staff are doing to help put these plans together, and a little clunky in the initial year, perhaps, but they have been successful. We are there to collect these materials because we don't want them going in that dumpster someone spoke about in their driveway. These manufacturers, as far as I know, Duracell and Hewlett Packard and Apple, they're still doing just fine. This is not going to be an inordinately expensive program to implement. What I do know, though, is that the residents did have to pay for this management, and continuing increases in the management, the way we're doing it now, is that it would end up in their trash bags. So I guess I wanted to just also have you think back to what Representative Dolan left you with yesterday, which I thought was an excellent list of all the things that this bill accomplishes. And I didn't catch them all, but it's cost effective for the residents and participants in these programs. It reduces the toxicity going into our landfill. It's preserving landfill space. Storage of these materials at homes or in grandpa's house, I think I heard referred to earlier. That's not safe. They have fire, threats of fire and threats to small children with these materials being stored inappropriately. It also protects the employees. I have probably 10, 11 employees who handle this material in trash bags regularly. And we're very concerned that not continue to be a hazard for them. So I'm not an expert on this bill, and I'm glad that you were able to get most of your questions about that answered from Matt and Josh, but I would be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Thank you for your presentation. That was very helpful. And also I appreciate your including humorous analogies for us to envision things on not a generally happy topic. Representative Pat.
Hi, thank you. I'm asking this in part as a resident of one of the small towns, Washington County towns in the Lamoille district. Is there any what impact or what effect? Let me rephrase this. In terms of the different towns in the district, is there any differences in terms of the percent of people in those towns who personally bring their trash to the transfer station versus having it collected by Casella or some other waste pickup firm.
So if I can ask you a question again about your question, how many people use our transfer station versus have a subscription service?
Yes, roughly, and is there a difference from town to town? I can talk about in Worcester, just my eyeball estimate is that 2/3 of the people go to the transfer station themselves, and almost nobody pays to have their trash picked up at their driveway. But I think that may vary in different places, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it does vary. And first of all, there's not a transfer station in every town. So towns that don't have that convenience have to travel further. And the further you have to travel, the more likely you are to say, maybe I should hire someone to come pick it up for me. The other reason that it's great that we love to see people use the transfer stations is because you can bring so many more materials to our facilities. I think we collect over 24 different materials at some of our facilities, textiles, tires, freon containing refrigerants, scrap metal. There's very, very long list. And I think that's why a lot of our facilities do see a large percentage of the population using them. And we also have people who have their trash and recycling picked up curbside, but they come to us for food scraps or for tires or computers, things that aren't being picked up curbside. Does that help?
Yes, I'll just say, just personally, about every 2, maybe 3 weeks, I make my trip to the transfer station, and I bring in the types of items bit by bit. I sometimes hand the person at the booth 3 batteries, but I've unloaded what I have, rather than it building up and having to be disposed of in some other way.
And also, if I could just add, the reality of subscription service is that it works better in the more densely populated communities, right? So it's a very expensive proposition if you only have 6 homes in a mile versus, 15. So the more densely populated areas are more likely to have subscription service because it's going to be a little bit more affordable and a little bit more, it will be offered. A lot of places you just can't get it.
Thanks.
Representative Torrey.
Thank you. My question is about education and outreach. Is that a sizable effort on your part, or do you see like the capacity for more of that through the stewardship organization?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a full-time person who does education and outreach, but they're not just dedicated to household hazardous waste. So we do work with schools and businesses on looking at, the chemicals that they're using, janitorial cleaners. So we do dedicate some of that person's time to HHW, but we're also out there educating people on food scraps and composting. We're educating them on recycling, on priority is reducing. Let's not buy a lot of these things we don't need or use up whatever we do need. And then recycling is huge, of course. But so I do think more outreach and education that this bill provides would be excellent. And I think more importantly, just, having the manufacturers recognizing this and when they see their dollars going into it, they are also inspired then to repackage, reduce packaging, sell smaller quantities. There are other upstream effects that EPR programs can have on manufacturers.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. It was really helpful.
Happy to do that. Thank you for having me.
The distance to Caledonia Spirits and back
Was
twice would be 10.8 miles. Enforceable.
Thank you for that. Members, we're going to take a break till 10:15. It's about a 7-minute break.